In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between dependent samples and independent samples. Data from dependent samples need different statistical methods than data from independent samples. You have to be able to distinguish whether two samples are dependent or independent. If not, then you will choose the incorrect test and your calculations, for example, p-values and the test statistic, can be incorrect. Independent sample means the observations in one sample are independent of those in the other sample. There are two common methods to get independent samples. First, randomized experiments. Randomized experiments that randomly allocate subjects to two treatments have independent samples. We could also use observational study. Observational study that separates subjects into groups according to the value for an explanatory variable. When the two samples involve the same subject, they are dependent. There are two common methods to get dependent samples. We could use what we call repeated measurements. Anytime we measure the same subject twice, before time and after time, these methods will lead to dependent samples. Second, we could use matched pairs. This means each subject in one sample is matched with a subject in the other sample. When you are trying to determine if the sample is a dependent sample or independent sample, you could use sample size to help you. If you are studying two different samples and each sample has a different sample size, then they have to be independent samples. If the sample size is the same, that does not mean that the samples are automatically dependent, because you could have two independent samples that have the same sample size. Here is some example about determining if the sampling is dependent or independent. A researcher wants to know if the mean length of stay in for profit hospitals is different from the mean length of stay in non-profit hospitals. He randomly selected 20 individuals in the for-profit hospital and matched them with 20 individuals in non-profit hospital by diagnosis. This sampling is dependent sample because the keyword matched. Matched means whenever you randomly select one individual from the for-profit hospital, you have to randomly select another individual from the non-profit hospital by, I would say, same type of diagnosis. Urban economists believe that commute times to work in the South are less than commute times to work in the Midwest. He randomly selects 40 employed individuals in the South and 45 employed individuals in the Midwest and determines the commute times. So this sampling is independent because the sample sizes are different.